Hello, world. Welcome to the Shannon Joy Show. Hello, world, and welcome to the Shannon Joy Show. We're broadcasting live from the Joy Virtual Studio right here in the beautiful Finger Lakes region of New York State. It is a winter wonderland up here in New York. It is Monday, November 10th, and we are ready to launch yet another very, very busy broadcast week. Great to be with all of you today. We are live on Rumble, live on Twitter. We're live on Spreely TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, YouTube, Substack, Facebook, you name it. Of course, an amazing collaboration with the folks over at Died Suddenly, broadcasting live on their massive Twitter account as well. The SJ Show reaching over, I think it's something along the lines of 1.2 million views every single month, which is just crazy on all of those platforms. And we do it completely independently. And that is thanks to all of you, those of you who follow the Shannon Joy Show, who comment on the live chat, who support this independent show by going to theshannonjoy.com, which is my independent website, signing up to become an angel investor and a sponsor of the Shannon Joy Show. I am so thankful for all of you. We are independent, not left, not right, just the news every day from an independent perspective, because, well, both of the political parties have gone and lost their damn minds. And this week, I mean, we are already launching this week with a ton of news happening. You see today's headline. We have the great, the amazing Jack Gamble. He's one of the best market analysts out there right now. He has a fantastic show every morning, and we're going to have an exclusive with him on everything happening in finance. And there was a lot of news last week that he was covering. He was one of the very first to cover. And this is the incoming bubble burst, the tech bubble bursting, and this new trend of these massive big seven AI companies with NVIDIA and OpenAI basically floating out and a plan to have a government bailout, stimulus checks, you name it. They're calling it all kinds of different things, but it is an indication that this tech bubble is about to burst. And we're going to be talking with Jack Gamble about that and a whole host of other financial issues in just about 10 minutes right here on the SJ Show. So we're going to bring him in live right around 12:30 p.m. Eastern time. But over the weekend, the big headline today, the federal government is set to open. So late last night, the Senate moved towards ending what was the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. And that was with a group of 8 Democrats who are defecting and moving their party to open up the government. Nothing really new here. It's a spending agreement. It is short-term in nature. They're going to have to do this dance again in January. But right now, they are going to fund the government through January and give federal workers back pay. And this was because likely a lot of elected officials were hearing it from their constituents. It was causing an enormous amount of chaos in the markets and uncertainty in the markets, which is something that we really don't need in our markets right now as we barrel headfirst into what everyone knows is a recession. But of course, Donald Trump, Scott Bessent, the Republican Party continuing to gaslight the American people in such an extraordinary way. It even has Marjorie Taylor Greene dropping F-bombs, telling everyone that the government is effing you, and recommending in a podcast over the weekend that 100 million Americans engage in a tax revolt and refuse to pay their federal taxes because the government is effing you. And I mean, can you really blame her? Right? So she dropped some F-bombs. People know what they're facing at the pump. They know what they're paying in energy costs, and they know what they're paying at the grocery store. So this idea that there's no there is just frankly outrageous. But of course, the president coming out now saying it's best economy ever. Scott Bessent, the Secretary Treasurer, on the morning shows over the weekend saying, once again, everything is great. We're in great shape. We're moving towards the greatest, all of the prices are coming down, and everyone is just very incredulous. By the way, you wouldn't be trotting out $2,000 stimulus checks and 50-year mortgages, which is what Trump did over the weekend, if the economy were in good shape. But no, Scott Bessent doubles down and he says that prices are coming down. Let's take a look at that video. TJ, who is producing the show today, he is all over the morning shows echoing his boss, the president of the United States of America, telling American people not to believe their lying eyes. Everything is going great. This is what he had to say over the weekend.
It could, the $2,000 dividend could come in lots of forms, in lots of ways, George. It could be just the tax decreases that we are seeing on the president's agenda. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, deductibility of auto loans. So, those are substantial deductions that, are being financed in the tax bill.
Secretary.
And let's run the other Scott Bessent clip as well, where George Stephanopoulos asks him about rising prices, and Bessent doubles down saying that there's no there. Everything looks great. Prices are coming down. Let's go ahead and run that clip too.
The president says, he just had posted this morning that there's almost no inflation. The consumer price index is higher than it was in the beginning of the year. Electricity rates are rising. So are prices for coffee, beef, vegetables, televisions. And it's not just me. It's not just economists who are saying that. Your own Republican members of Congress are saying that, including Marjorie Taylor Greene. Let's look.
I go to the grocery store myself. Grocery prices remain high. Energy prices are high. My electricity bills are higher here in Washington, D.C. at my apartment, and they're also higher at my house in Rome, Georgia, higher than they were a year ago. So affordability is a problem.
How do you respond to Congresswoman Greene?
Well, George, what I would respond to is electricity prices are a state problem. And, I was very interested to see in the earlier clip where the governor-elect of New Jersey said, well, I'm going to bring down energy prices. Well, it was her predecessor, Phil Murphy, who took them up. So, look, there are things that the federal government can control. Local electricity prices are not one of them, but energy prices, gasoline prices are way down. And, we are doing what we can every day. I think we are on a very good path to bringing prices down.
All right, so that was Scott Bessent. All the prices are going down. Everything is great. In fact, last week, as you guys know, Donald Trump said to America, Thanksgiving dinner is cheaper than ever, right? It's the cheapest Thanksgiving ever. No one believes any of it, and especially when they begin to float the $2,000 stimulus checks. Now, it's interesting that Scott Bessent walked that back. The president of the United States of America put out a tweet, and this is the tweet. People that are against the tariffs are fools, wrote President Donald Trump. We are now the richest, most respected country in the world with almost no inflation. All right. So no inflation that he says to the American people. It's insane. And a record stock market price. 401ks are highest ever. Well, we know that is largely due to the manipulation of the markets and the tech bubble, which we're going to be talking to Jack Gamble about in just a moment. But he says we are talking trillions of dollars and will soon begin to pay down our enormous debt of $37 trillion. He said record investment in the United States of America, plants and factories going up all over the place. I don't even know where he's getting this information from. And he's saying now a dividend, okay, not a Stimmy check, it's a dividend of at least $2,000 per person will be paid to everyone. That has everyone crying stimulus once again, a second round of stimulus checks. But of course, Bessent is on the Sunday shows saying, oh no, you're not going to get a stimulus check. You're going to get that $2,000 in the form of lower taxes, right? So the people who aren't paying taxes on tips and in other areas, so they're not even really going to give us a stimulus check, but they're going to call it that, and it's all just a complete mess. It's all a complete mess. And we should have learned our lessons about stimulus from 2020. I dug up a piece from Daniel Horowitz that I would recommend everyone revisit. I linked it in the show notes today of the Shannon Joy Show. He wrote this back in March because we still have not dug out from, one of the worst assaults on the United States of America, our economy and our free market. And that was the lockdowns of 2020 and the massive, massive amount of money printing and stimulus checks that went out, not only to the American people, but to small and medium-sized businesses. We never saw a larger transfer of wealth from the middle class to the elite billionaire class, and thousands upon thousands of businesses were shuttered forever because of those lockdowns. Now, they tried to mitigate that, of course, with stimulus checks, but the problem is we don't have any money. So they churned up the money printing machine and they printed the money to hand out the stimulus checks, which created the inflation, the persistent inflation that we are dealing with today. And so this is what Daniel Horowitz had to say about this latest round of $2,000 stimulus checks. And he said this in March of 2016, and he's absolutely right. The average family of four below the income threshold level of, I believe it was 75K, right around there, received $10,400 in federal aid in year 2020. Now, it sounds like a great deal, right? The trouble is that Republicans have failed to clearly explain to the American people how the money printing that funded the stimulus checks and other spending led to a cost of living crisis that has hit consumers hard and now persists multiple years. We're into the end of 2024 or 25 heading into 26, and this is still persisting. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the rise in living costs in the 3 years since the COVID-19 stimulus far outweighed the benefits families received from those checks. In 2020, the average family of four needed $61,000, 332 to cover annual expenses. By 2023, that same family required $77,280, a staggering $16,000 increase. So just in that 1 year, the $10,000 stimulus check that they received from the government actually cost them $16,000 in increased prices for everything. It gets worse, though. From 2021 to 2023, families spent an additional $33,179 on the same goods and services due to inflation driven by COVID-era spending. This was also reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, right? So in subsequent years, it only gets worse. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has not yet released the data for 2024. They did, and it got worse, but the average family budget likely exceeded $80,000, at least $18,000 more than in 2020. This year's costs are already rising, and Daniel Horowitz wrote this in March of this year. So in effect, and here's the pull quote from this piece, which is linked in the show notes of the Shannon Joy Show and has all of the data to back it up. We traded 1 year and a round of stimulus checks that gave us $10,400 for the average family in free cash for some families in exchange for more than $50,000 in additional costs over 4 years. A burden that will only grow unless we finally cut federal spending, which the government has indicated there is no way that they're going to do that. Now, dump on top, this was written in March of 2025. Dump multiple rounds of tariffs, which are taxes on the American people, which has slowed production and the labor market in this country. And we are barreling towards a full-scale crisis. This is why, unbelievable, Trump is now touting a 50-year mortgage, which is basically slavery. That's insane. President Trump then, in this same weekend, proposed a 50-year mortgage. He posted a picture of himself and President Roosevelt. President Roosevelt gave us the 30-year mortgage after the Great Depression. Now Donald Trump is pitching the 50-year mortgage and trying to call what we are in right now some type of economic golden era, when everyone knows that we are in an absolute recession and likely a depression as well, right? In fact, Scott Bessent even admitted that last weekend on the Sunday shows. So they're just jerking us left and right. It is a schizophrenic messaging that we're getting from this administration. And this is why Marjorie Taylor Greene is dropping the F-bombs and encouraging 100 million Americans to engage in a tax strike, right? A tax revolt, which is pretty extraordinary when you think about it, coming from a sitting, duly elected member of the House of Representatives. But this is outrageous. All right. So Trump is proposing the 50-year mortgage, and this is supposed to reduce monthly payments for first-time home buyers facing median home prices of $420,000 and an average buyer at the age of 40. This is outrageous. The FHFA director, Bill Pulte, endorsed this plan as a game changer, calling it a game changer, similar to FDR's 30-year mortgage. But I mean, everyone knows this is basically renting your house from the banks and paying exorbitant amounts in interest. In fact, there were a couple, we have a couple examples now. Wall Street Apes came out with a tweet challenging this, basically saying an $802,000 mortgage comparison at 6%. If you have a 30-year mortgage, your monthly payments are $4,811. The total loan cost ends up being $1.7 million. In a 50-year mortgage, your monthly payment only drops by $600, but the total loan cost basically doubles, $2.5 million for an $800,000 property, which is insane. $1,733,000 just in interest. Interest is the problem, right? Not the mortgage. And so there was a fantastic response to this from a guy named James Fishback, who I've never heard of, but his response was dead on when they began to float the 50-year mortgage, which is, again, basically 21st century feudalism, right? Like where the elite billionaire class and the banksters own everything and we rent from them, our cars, our homes, you name it. This is the equivalent of the Great Reset. You will own nothing and be happy. It is the same policy, the same prescription that was offered to us by, the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum, right? Like this is what we were talking about during the Biden administration. They are just pursuing that to an even greater extent during the Bush or the Trump administration, only using different talking points. It's terrible. This is what James Fishbank had to say about a 50-year mortgage. He likened it to modern day slavery. Let's go ahead and roll that tape.
We are Americans. We are not slaves. We are not slaves to the plantation owner. We are not slaves to China. And we are not slaves to Wall Street. This 50-year mortgage idea is a spit in the face. It is an insult. We did not vote for this. We did not vote to become debt slaves to private equity firms and the big banks in Wall Street. Right now, the median home in America costs $500,000. At the prevailing mortgage rate of 6%, you would have $580,000 of interest payments over 30 years. If we went with this ridiculous, inane idea of a 50-year mortgage, that would be $1.1 million of mortgage payments for a $500,000 home. So you would end up paying $1.5 million for a $500,000 home. My grandfather, who was a World War II vet, he passed in 2018. He always told me that we don't want to pass down this national debt to the next generation, to our kids and our grandkids, to become slaves to China. I'm not worried about China anymore. I'm worried about becoming slaves to Wall Street. And the know-nothing Republicans and the do-nothing Democrats seem to be working together once again to push this usury on Americans. It is an absolute insult. If we want to get serious about housing affordability, the crisis that is staring down my generation, when my dad was growing up, in the 1960s, half of 30-year-olds, half of them were married and owned their home. Today, only 15% of 30-year-olds are married and own their home. If you can't own your home, you can't get married. If you can't get married, you can't have kids. If you can't have kids, then honestly, what is the point? This is an insult. This is a genocide against the Gen Z generation to try to foist this sort of slavery and usury on us. We reject it 100%. If we want to get serious about housing affordability, why don't we ban Blackstone? Why don't we ban Blackstone, which is one of the largest donors to the Democrat and Republican Party? Why don't we ban Blackstone from buying up entire neighborhoods, and then forcing us to rent from them? If we're serious about housing, why don't we take the 55 million people here on immigration visas and remove them from our country immediately, because they are living in homes that could be going to Americans who have been here, who have worked hard, who have fought and bled for this country. I am sick and tired of the do-nothing Republicans and the know-nothing Democrats being in bed with Wall Street and forcing us to become slaves, debt slaves, forcing us to accept this unmitigated, unencumbered usury. We did not vote for this. The 50-year mortgage. If this is allowed to continue, the Republicans will lose the midterms, and they'll deserve it big time.
And that was James Fishbank. First time I ever heard of the fella, but that will preach 100%. The American dream is the dream of home ownership. And explaining the scam, he mentioned Blackstone, BlackRock, private equity, major firms coming in, manipulating the market. And there was another great explainer from the Vino mom, also talking to her as well about coming on the show. She explained how this scam is working. Let's use that, the scam of rising home prices, TJ, and then we'll get to our guests of the day. But this was a great explainer as well. This is not natural, what is happening with home prices and what is happening in terms of your mortgage and boxing out regular Americans from pursuing the dream of home ownership. This isn't something that is happening by accident. This is happening on purpose. And this is probably why Marjorie Taylor Greene is dropping those F-bombs, because they know what they're doing. They are doing this to us. They know that it is going to hurt us, and they just don't care. Donald Trump and the Republicans, Scott Bessent and their partners, their cronies on Wall Street, plan on pushing Americans out of the dream of home ownership. And let me tell you, a 50-year mortgage with most of the costs coming out in interest, that is not home ownership. That is not property ownership. That is not generational wealth. And it is the exact opposite. We need to rage against that. But this is what the Vino mom had to say about how they are doing this to us. It's a great explainer. Take a watch.
They buy a whole housing, like a 500 house division, and they're going to get those at a huge discount because they only make 5 models and they buy everything in bulk. We might have had to pay $500,000 for it. They're getting them at $300,000. Okay, so they buy 500 houses at $300,000. Okay, they put them all in a portfolio. They could flip that through a secondaries market, but even better, they could hold those houses for a year. Don't let anyone move in. Keep it looking like a construction zone. Okay, and then a year later, they sell 3 of those houses that they bought for $300,000 to themselves in another fund for $700,000. And that creates 3 comps in the neighborhood. They do 1 of each of the models. Okay. And now the entire neighborhood, each house is valued at $700,000. And then they're going to turn them into obscene rentals. And simultaneously, they're going to have a double and a half value on that portfolio to borrow against. Right. And every American in that community was just priced out of everything around that community.
God, they're so smart. Aren't they just so smart the way they do this? They're so just clever the way they do this, isn't it?
That was Tiffany Ciccone. She is really great at explaining some of these things. They're also doing this actually with energy companies as well. If you're wondering why your energy prices are going up, there is manipulation happening there as well. It seems like everyone is just cheating. That they are running away with the piggy bank and really impacting regular Americans to an extent that I don't think we've ever seen in this country. It started in 2020, continued under the Biden administration through his presidency, and now continues under the Trump administration as well. This is untenable. And so all of those clips are linked in the show notes of the Shannon Joy Show. But yeah, BlackRock, and this is happening in my community. I know the houses where this happened. It's crazy when you think about how they were able to accomplish this. So we need some truth. We're going to get some truth from Jack Gamble today. He is our guest today on the Shannon Joy Show. We're going to talk about the $2,000 Stimmy package, the 50-year mortgage, the AI bubble, the big tech bubble, and the bailouts being pitched to this government. It looks like, all of their record gains in the stock market are nothing but circular trading, and it's completely unethical, immoral, and probably illegal in some way. But it's like no one even asks about it anymore. We're going to talk about all that today with our guest, Jack Gamble. He is an amazing market analyst, and we're going to be bringing him in just a moment after this quick commercial break. He is the host of Nobody Special Finance, has an amazing following on YouTube and also on Twitter as well. You can follow him at JG_Gamble. But when we come back, we're going to hit a quick commercial break. Then we're going to come back and welcome Jack in, take some of your questions and your comments, and talk about I don't know, this economy. There are so much disinformation out there and so many lies, and it's all so complicated, but I think he's going to help us understand what is going on and maybe help regular people figure out how to weather this storm, because something's coming. So keep it tuned right here. We're going to welcome Jack in just a moment on the Shannon Joy Show. You might want to consider checking out Rocketdollar. Go to www.rocketdollar.com/ShannonJoy, and you can get an IRA information packet. You can start investing as soon as your account is funded. And with the self-directed IRA, you can invest in a variety of alternative assets outside of what many believe is a corrupt and bloated, inflated stock market dominated predominantly by the tech companies. So you can invest in real estate in your own backyard, right? In your own community. You can invest in private equity or a startup, even precious metals, gold and silver. They have the self-directed gold and silver backed IRAs, which is real gold and silver that is funded through your IRA. These are all ways for you to use your IRA accounts to your benefit and stop partnering with the federal government. So go to rocketdollar.com/ShannonJoy. That is rocketdollar.com/ShannonJoy.
This is Jennifer with darkbags.com. I wanted to show you one of our newest products from Escape Zone. This is our satellite Faraday sleeve. So it actually will fit your satellite phone, which we've noticed that there wasn't any product on the market that perfectly fit them, so we decided to make them ourselves. And it has this Velcro closure right here to close it up, and that makes this dust and water resistant. So what's nice about this Faraday pouch is that it'll protect against any EMPs. So your device is, your emergency device actually will always be protected in here as long as it stays in here. You can take it out for everyday use, but if you're not using it, we recommend that you store it in here. Again, this is available on darkbags.com.
Big thank you to our sponsors over at Purge. Right now, this is the product that I've been using. I'm on day 7 of my 15-day intestinal purge. So this is an advanced cleanse for digestive health. And, growing up, speaking of our healthcare system, every time you get sick, whether you have the sniffles, a sore throat, inflammation, you go to the doctor and it's always either a virus or a bacteria, bacteria. So you get an antiviral or an antibacteria. Well, when was the last time you went to your medical doctor when you were dealing with some sort of malady and they said to you, hey, you know what? Maybe it's a parasite. Maybe it's not viral or bacterial, but maybe it's parasitic. This idea that humans can't have parasites or don't have parasites is one of the most interesting suppression suppressed pieces of information that I have seen. And I just thought of, when I first started thinking about parasites, I'm like, wow, like no one ever talks about them. But it is very true that humans can have parasites, and those parasites can impact your health in many, many negative ways. Right now, Purge is giving you guys 15% off of your order if you go to www.purgestore.com/joy. That is purgestore.com/joy. Use the promo code JOY. Join me on this cleanse, right? Again, we can't do anything about the parasites in Washington, D.C., but we can take care of it. We can take responsibility for our own bodies and make sure that we are naturally healthy with regular parasitic cleanses. 15% off right now in your order if you go to purgestore.com/joy.
What difference does it make who you marry, so long as he's a southerner and thinks like you? And when I'm gone, I leave Tara to you.
I don't want Tara. Plantations don't mean anything when...
Do you mean to tell me, Katie Scarlett O'Hara, that Tara, that land doesn't mean anything to you? Why, land is the only thing in the world worth working for, worth fighting for, worth dying for. Because it's the only thing that lasts.
Oh, Paul, you talk like an Irishman.
It's proud I am that I'm Irish. And don't you be forgetting, Missy, that you're half Irish too. And to anyone with a drop of Irish blood in them, why, the land they live on is like their mother. Oh, but there, now you're just a child. It'll come to you, this love of the land. There's no getting away from it if you're Irish.
That is one of my all-time number one favorite movies in the history of the world, Scarlett O'Hara. So I had to run that land clip like that. Can't make more of it, right? And property, your home, it's the land. It was something that was completely unique to the United States of America, this ability for us to own our land, own property, pass on generational wealth. And Scarlett O'Hara seemed to understand it later in Gone with the Wind. And you know, but it's, I mean, this is something that people, I don't think in younger generations realize is so incredibly important. Like that dream of home ownership is being stolen from our young people. And today in the Joy Virtual Studio, we're joined by our good friend, Jack Gamble. He is nobody special, but I think he's very special. Nobody special finance every day. He is on YouTube, also on the Twitter at JG_Gamble, and has some of the best market analysis every morning. Jack, welcome to the program. Great to see you. You look good. And we're here to talk about the American dream and, you know, the fact that it seems to be slipping away, especially from our young people, looking at the news, and just everything is just so chaotic in the markets. How are you doing today? Happy Monday.
I'm good. Happy Monday, Shannon. Thank you for having me back on your show. It's a pleasure to be here.
Have you ever watched Gone with the Wind? Is that a movie that that you've ever watched?
It's been a while. I remember that one playing when I was a kid. Dad had the 2 VHS box set for Gone with the Wind, and I found something else to do when that one came on.
That was my all-time favorite. But no, that discussion about the land, though, property, home ownership, and how important it is, really resonates with me. It's always resonated with me. And for the first time, I am approaching 50, and I don't remember a time in my life when the ability for a regular American, college-educated, 2-income family, young person is unable to pursue the American dream of home ownership. It is literally being ripped away from them with what I believe is manipulation of these markets. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, we're going to talk about the economy in general, but let's first get your thoughts on that 50-year mortgage and the scam that is really breaking the backs of regular Americans who seek to own a home.
So the concept of a 50-year mortgage, which President Trump came out with over the weekend, I think is symptomatic of a phenomenon that we're seeing playing out in many corners of the economy that's become known as extend and pretend, where these assets, whether they're stocks, stakes in private equity companies, loans to private companies, or houses, they are no longer worth what we're carrying them as. And you can look at the fact that nobody can afford to buy these houses. Like if this house, say random house, is really worth $500,000, if nobody can afford it and nobody is willing to pay $500,000 on it because they can't afford the payments, then guess what? it ain't worth $500,000. That price has to come down until a buyer materializes. But instead of letting that home price come down, which is what is healthier for everybody except the government, instead of letting that home come down, we're going to pretend it's still worth $500,000 by extending the mortgage duration to 50 years. We're doing the same thing with these private equity companies. We're doing the same thing with stocks, with debt in every corner of the economy. The problem is not the asset itself. The problem is we have debased the money so much. We have destroyed our currency, creating this massive inflation, which you were correctly railing against in the opening. And what we're doing with these silly $2,000 stimmies, not stimmies, whatever you want to call them, the 50-year extension, the more extended pretend, it's ultimately going to result in more currency debasement. And I want to give you a little anecdote real quick, if you humor me here. Yeah. In 1964, the minimum wage was $1.25. And 1964, I didn't choose that date at random. That was the last year that we put silver in our coins. All quarters and dimes and half dollars were 90% silver up until 1964. That's when we stopped. Today, the silver content of that $1.25 of minimum wage would be worth $44.60. So is the problem we didn't raise the minimum wage, or is the problem the government hasn't spent enough money, or we haven't borrowed enough and we don't have enough of these programs to end poverty once and for all, even though poverty never seems to go away? Or is the problem that we have destroyed the value of the money? Because there's a lot of people, I think left and right, who have been screaming for the minimum wage thing for years, who would say, I would gladly go back to $1.25 minimum wage if it bought me $44.60 worth of today's goods.
Right.
And there's a great website called WTF Happened in 1971 that I highly recommend that website. And it is just loaded with charts, things like the wealth gap, the average income, incarceration rates. They break it down by ethnicity. And you can just see all of these silly social things that divide people, that people fight about. They all started to get so much worse in 1971. That's 5 years after we took the silver out of the coins. That's when we closed the gold window and said, the dollar is no longer on the gold standard. And what you're looking at right there, net productivity and hourly compensation, the first chart that comes up, that's the wealth gap exploding. Our wages stopped going up. You can see the blue line. They went up a little bit, but not as much as the economic activity we generated from our wages, which means the people who own the company got all that benefit. The wealth gap has expanded tremendously because of this endless cycle of currency debasement. And then you can throw other things that they use to suppress wages, like increasing the available labor supply via things like illegal immigration. But so many of the things we fight about, so many of the things that cause problems, if we fixed the money, it would go away.
It seems that is the one area where Democrats and Republicans agree 100% and are in lockstep with one another. And this is why, as a political analyst, I have told my audience, and this is a very difficult spot to be in as a political analyst, and that is in opposition to both political parties, right? Democrats and Republicans, I don't see either as a lesser of any evil. I see them as equally terrible. And the reason I rail on this, people are like, well, Shannon, why can't you just get over it and shut up about this? Is that this one issue? It's the fact that they are in lockstep and working together on the single most issue of the day, and that is the devaluing of our dollar, and it's essentially very slowly and systematically enslaving Americans into a control and command economic system, a 21st century feudal system, it feels like, where the nobles have all the land, all the money, all the power, all the wealth, all the assets, and they simply, rent it out to the serfs, right? Where, those concepts of us, a robust middle class, a thriving free market with small and medium-sized businesses creating competition so that they can drive prices down and all of those things. Like, it just seems like that both parties are working to absolutely obliterate that. And that's why we have to oppose both parties, right? I mean, have you seen any other issue where there is as much agreement in these two, and they'll fight, but they really never, ever change the trajectory of what's happening?
Yep. They'll all pay lip service to preserving the middle class, to helping work Americans. They'll all make silly talking points about bringing costs down. But at the end of the day, they're all money printers, because they have shown us time and time again, they will spin up that money printer the second things get hard. And they do it to bail out the donor class. And they'll always do something like a Stimmy to distract us, right? Give people $600 checks in their mailbox so that they don't realize they're having 2,000 stolen from their back pocket while they reach for that check. And the money that was stolen, it came later with the inflation. And I remember everybody was all celebrating, oh, we're going to get money during the vid, we'll get our the advances of the child care tax credits. They just started dropping money in people's accounts. And then the $600 checks came out, and the expanded unemployment benefits and everything. And guys, they're stealing from us, and they're saying you're welcome while they do it. And then shockingly, prices start going up like crazy 2 years later. It's the same thing that happens every time they print money. And it's important for people to remember that, because now they're starting to dangle those stimmies in front of us again. It means they're getting closer and closer to turning the money printers back on to save their own butts. And regardless of who's in charge, whether it's an R or a D, they'll both try it. And it's important that people at least let their voices be heard, to know they're not in favor of it.
How are they printing money these days? I mean, are they actually printing, or is it quantitative easing, or are they just adding zeros? I mean, what is the mechanism? It seems like we used to talk about that a lot. There had to be legislation, and they'd have to kind of pursue the policies, but everything is so muddled today. Where's all this money coming from? Are they just inventing it? I mean, is it just they're just adding numbers to the balance sheets and saying we're off to the races?
Private banks actually can print money out of thin air when they make loans. That is fractional reserve banking, where if a bank has $100, they could loan $1,000 from that 100. And you might be saying that math doesn't work out. It does when you're a bank and you own a money printer. And as long as everybody doesn't want that $100 back at the same time, that's a bank run, you're fine. So we have had two things have been going on simultaneously for the last few years. Starting in 2020, it was early 2022, we started quantitative tightening, actually destroying bank reserves, destroying money. That's kind of, think of that as base money. Think of that as the number of chairs in a game of musical chairs is your bank reserves. And the Federal Reserve directly controls the number of chairs in the game. But as that's been going on, we have had a huge credit expansion in this country. People have been borrowing more and more money. And every time a loan is made, money is created. And I want you to think as the money being created by the loans as adding players to the game of musical chairs. Got it. So for the last few years, we've had a huge expansion in the money supply as the Fed has been destroying bank reserves. So we've been adding players to the game of musical chairs while taking chairs away at the same time. Obviously, that is not going to work out very well when the music stops or when the music slows. And that's kind of the situation we're in right now. The money is at an all-time high. People have not made adjustments to their standard of living, which they can no longer afford because life got more expensive. They turned to various debt instruments, home equity lines of credit, bigger car loans, running up the credit card, buy now, pay later debt. The business world, private credit has become this behemoth that is already starting to cause a lot of problems. The messing of the money supply and the inflation, we still haven't really paid the bill that's coming due on that one.
You said something last week in one of your morning shows. By the way, I highly recommend you guys follow Jack Gamble. His handle on the twit is at JG_Gamble. That's your
JG
handle,
Nuke,
right?
Yeah.
JG Nuke. I'm so sorry. Yeah, no, I should remember that. And he also, you can follow him on YouTube as well, has about a 40-minute to 1 hour daily show where he explains the news, the financial news, in a way that is brilliant, I have to say, Jack. So thank you for all that you do. I've learned so much from you just in the past couple months. But You mentioned last week, because we just seem to be descending. It feels as if this dance has been continuing since the 1960s, right? 70s, since we went off the gold standard. And it's just gotten more convoluted, and it's only accelerated, and it's only grown the problem. There hasn't been, it's inflated the bubble even more. And they've had a variety of different ways of doing this. Mainly, distracting us. We're fighting with each other over whatever political football it is, which you mentioned. And so we're not watching what they're doing with their other hand, which is screwing the American people. But you mentioned it used to be, as little as 5 years ago, people were living paycheck to paycheck, right? They're having a harder time saving, a harder time, creating that generational wealth, but we were able to survive paycheck to paycheck. You mentioned last week, it's no longer paycheck to paycheck, it's loan to loan. So people are overspending above and beyond what they are bringing in. And the consumer, the American individual or the American family, is papering over that deficit with one high interest loan after another. And we've seen the explosion in these payroll loans, where people are they're buying, takeout from Chipotle and financing it, right? Paying a little bit of interest on it so they can make 4 payments. It's just insane. Can you talk about that phenomenon? And also Chipotle. Some are saying that Chipotle is the canary in the coal mine of the average American consumer's ability to spend, and that the roosters or the chickens are coming home to roost at this point, as we also see consumer spending down and shipments down as we head into the holiday season. Do you think that we're gonna finally see this in real time? Do you think that they're gonna be able to hide this anymore? I have a feeling that the fat lady is about to sing on this, and that the game of musical chairs tragically might be over, because I don't see anywhere out, especially with that tech bubble that you talked about, which we'll talk about in the next segment. But do you think that we are close to some type of endpoint here?
Yes, I do. I would hesitate to say it's going to happen any day now. I've learned not to underestimate the dirtbaggery of financial decision makers in this country. So I wouldn't be surprised to see something like Stimmy checks come out to try to delay this reckoning. And, Stimmy checks would delay it, but ultimately make it worse. That's also important to keep in mind. You mentioned an interesting thing there. Chipotle Mexican Grill, they reported earnings last week, and their stock just got destroyed when they reported earnings. That's interesting because it's a fast casual restaurant that's very popular with younger consumers, and their earnings was a big miss. So that's indicative of young professionals cutting back because they just cannot afford the standard of living anymore. And when you make cuts, usually eating out is the first thing that you're going to cut back. And, we also had DoorDash reported earnings. DoorDash reported a pretty lousy quarter as well. I don't follow that stock as closely, but DoorDash is one of those things that, again, predominantly younger folks, it's one of the first things that gets cut. And so they also had a pretty rough go of it last week. And I do think this is indicative of the cumulative pain that has built up in the system. The cost of living went up about 30% in a very short time frame. Wages only went up about 5%. And we tried to make up for that with debt. It didn't work, or it worked for a little while. And now we're doing silly things like, pay in 4. You can take a loan from a firm so you can still afford your DoorDash, and then DoorDash can go buy the Chipotle Mexican Grill and bring it to you. People financing lunch for easy payments. That's a little that's very what stagey, if you will. People usually say what stage of the market crash are you in when people are financing lunch. And there's a million different anecdotes like this. Luxury car makers doing very poorly over in Europe. It used to be that only the low-end car makers were struggling, but the rich were still doing well. Well, now there's fewer people can afford the luxury cars. They're trading down. Someone who used to buy a Jaguar or a Porsche is buying a Camry or an Accord now. So it's catching up with us. And I think they're going to try to spin up the money printers again to finance it.
We're talking to Jack Gamble. What do you make of inflation? I still cannot believe that this president, Donald Trump, and his Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, and Republican leadership in the House and the Senate, and the Republican Party, and MAGA Inc., and Con Inc., all the yappers on conservative media, all right? And even New York Times and CNN, right? Talking about this like kind of booming economy, right? The stock market is doing so well. It's like this very strange dystopian kind of gaslighting type of event where everyone's kind of telling us, we all know what we're experiencing with inflation, yet the political class is continuing to tell us that everything is great. And granted, some of the Democrats are talking about, pain at the pump and energy prices and food prices because it's politically convenient for them to do that. But there's not as much intense scrutiny of this economic situation by the left that I would normally expect. And we have like just straight up gaslighting. Like, am I going crazy? I'm listening to Scott Bessent and I'm like, is it me? Like, am I losing my mind every time I go to the grocery store? Like every time I pay for gas, and I'm talking to other people about this. Everyone seems to be experiencing it. Like, how do you gauge whether or not inflation is happening? Is it happening, or are they? I mean, it's the strangest situation that we're in.
I can tell you the inflation statistics are deeply flawed. The best one that we have to go off of, Consumer Price Index, or CPI, which currently sits just over 3%. Unfortunately, that's the best one we have. And pardon my French, but it sucks.
Right.
So it's also important to keep in mind that inflation is a rate of change, right? So even you can have inflation come down to zero and say we have no inflation, and life is still unaffordable, because inflation at zero, CPI going to zero, just means prices stopped going up. It doesn't mean they came back down to where they were. Matter of fact,
right.
We never get negative CPI. It very rarely happens, because Keynesian economics, which is what rules our economy, they will not tolerate any bit of deflation whatsoever, especially not when they owe $37 trillion. If you let dollars start becoming more valuable and you owe 37 trillion of them, you're hosed. So they'll never let CPI go negative. But at the very least, let's get it to nothing. The Federal Reserve targets 2% because that makes their owners and their puppet masters more wealthy, and 2% inflation is pretty much the rate you heat up the water where the frog doesn't realize he's being boiled alive. We are the frog in this metaphor, by the way, and jumping out of the pot would be pitchforks coming out and the guillotine making a comeback. By the way, we just had a socialist elected in New York City. Let's not act like we're really that far from that stage. Right. Multiple assassination attempts, political violence getting normal. When people can't afford to eat, they get pissed off. And the ruling class is poking that dog in the cage very much here. Now, with inflation, it's interesting because the biggest contributor to the CPI index, it counts for about a quarter of the overall math, is this statistic called owner's equivalent rent. They call up homeowners out of the blue and they say, how much would you rent your house for, furnished or unfurnished and without utilities? And people usually give an answer that's their mortgage payment plus $100 or $200. That's how most people would answer that question. And then they report that as housing inflation. And that is a highly, highly flawed statistics. It doesn't check comps. It doesn't look at what asking rents are. And to be honest with you, this is going to upset some people, but the numbers are the numbers. In a huge swath of the country right now, asking rents and median home price is coming down.
Okay.
It's not reflected in the CPI math. And I'm not saying it's happening in your locality, wherever you happen to be. Actually, the Northeast, it's specifically not seeing that. But all the booming areas, Texas, Tennessee, Florida, you're seeing these things come down. So the CPI, the biggest contributor to CPI, should be going down right now, but it's not. It's one of the problems with our indicator. We actually do have a little bit, very little bit, of housing disinflation going on. That's not captured in the index. Okay. That being said, there's other things like beef is going vertical, coffee is going vertical for isolated reasons, but we still have life getting more expensive. And that's besides the fact that we can still not afford the increase in cost of living that has already happened. Our wages haven't gone up from where they were in 2020.
And that's just making everything more difficult for every American. What do you make of the president and the tariff actions? Big news. The Supreme Court is, the oral arguments were heard last week. It was pretty evident from the line of questioning, even from conservative justices, that his tariffs are in big trouble, that they might be determined to be unconstitutional. And of course, I mean, we had the gaslighting over the past 6 months that tariffs don't impact regular consumers. They don't impact, American businesses. We know that they do, again. What impact have the tariffs had specifically? I mean, the inflation was already baked into the cake, and it's been baked into the cake. But now you couple that with, frankly, reckless tariff policies that are arbitrary and capricious, sometimes used to like tank, to rig the markets. And, we've seen insider trading like blatantly based on some of the tariff actions that Trump has taken. I mean, it's completely outside of the boundaries of the Constitution. But what have in your estimation, the tariff policies done to exacerbate the issue in the U.S. and the economic outlook for small businesses and middle-class Americans?
So surprisingly, very surprisingly, we have seen very little impact of tariffs in the CPI, in the consumer price index. And then see earlier comment about all the reasons why I hate the CPI index. But so take that with a grain of salt. Right. But it hasn't materialized in consumer prices yet. And that's a big asterisk because we did a lot of front loading in the first quarter of this year. Everybody knew tariffs were coming. And so a lot of businesses ordered way more inventory than they needed. And that surge of imports actually is why we had a negative GDP print in the first quarter. We went deeply negative. So we've been selling inventory that we bought before tariffs. So it hasn't worked its way through yet. And there is a big question mark still, how much. We know it's going to drive consumer prices higher. We just don't know by how much. Will companies do what Japanese automakers are doing right now? For example, Japanese automakers are saying, we're going to eat it with our profit margins. We're just going to make less per car. We're not going to raise the price. We'll eat the tariffs. A mom and pop small business on the corner in small town America can't afford to do that. Their profit margins aren't that thick. A big conglomerate can afford to do that, especially because they could go to the bond market and borrow billions of dollars. And then they could leave their prices alone while mom and pop gets squeezed out, goes out of business. They capture mom and pop's market share, and then they raise their prices. So it's still a very big question. What will the tariffs do to prices? Now, you can see it in a lot of things like some of these surveys, like the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Survey. They interview a lot of business owners. A lot of these, the ISM and the S&P manufacturers PMI. I apologize for all the acronyms. I live in this water, so I say this stuff all the time. But you can see in the surveys of these business managers and supply chain managers that the tariffs are wreaking havoc. You can see it in the import data. There's a guy named Craig Fuller, runs an outfit called FreightWaves, fantastic website. And you can see the trucking volumes are down. The number of cargo containers coming into the country are down. So less stuff coming in, that means less consumption happening, could mean higher prices due to supply limitations, or, maybe if people start consuming less, maybe the prices don't go up because people just can't afford the higher prices. So that's very much still a question. And there's a lot of people pontificating on what they think will happen. We just don't know yet. There's never been anything like this, like the sudden surge of protectionism that we've had.
Right. Well, and then you've mentioned stagflation. So high prices, inflation, plus a weakening labor market, meaning that wages are stagnant. And it's basically the economy is just slowing down. Everything is kind of just grinding to a halt as businesses hunker down because they don't know what to expect. I think that probably most reasonably intelligent business owners can see all of this happening in real time, even though our politicians won't articulate it. right? It's just the same political rhetoric and infighting that we see every year. But they're certainly seeing this, and as you know, and you've mentioned before, markets absolutely hate unpredictability. Like when you can't forecast, when you don't know. I was thinking about Tylenol the other day, and it was just, I was marveling at how the president could stand up in the Oval Office and literally tank the stock of an American company, a private company that makes Tylenol, based on statements that he made about linking it to autism, and literally like make them super vulnerable. I just saw a headline last week that some big pharma company came in and gobbled up Tylenol, probably at a bargain, right? But like, that's just blowing my mind. How does any business person, I think about mom and pops restaurants that have very, very, slim margins, right? In terms of profitability, like, how are we going to survive? It's the unpredictability, and then like the cheating, the just plain. We're going to talk about AI in the next segment, but how can businesses even survive this? It's insane to me. I mean, the Biden administration didn't do things like this. I mean, it wasn't good, and they were continuing to print the money. I mean, but this is just volatile and chaotic and unpredictable, and I just don't know where we go from here. I've never seen anything like it.
So when businesses don't have certainty, they get defensive, and they stop making investments in their company. They stop hiring. And I think when this shutdown ends, we're going to get the answer to that. I think we're going to find out that unemployment has risen while the lights were off at the government. By the way, I was talking about CPI again. One thing, when the government shut down, they started doing a lot more imputations in the CPI math. It was basically just educated guesses on what prices have done. They didn't actually go out and measure because they laid a lot of people off. Imputations took a huge step up with the new guy that took over at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So for all we know, we are in stagflation right now, which is, supposedly the Keynesian economists tell us that's impossible. The Keynesians live by this thing called the Phillips curve that says as inflation goes up, unemployment should be going down. And as unemployment goes down, inflation should go up. We shouldn't be able to have the two moving in unison. And yet it happened in the 1970s, and it's probably going to start happening now too. It's almost like the Keynesians are wrong about everything, but it's the only thing we teach in our schools. So it's what we got. But yeah, the answer is they get defensive, and they stop planning for the future, and they stop taking risk. And that's very recessionary. That slows things down.
Yeah. Well, we haven't spoken about the elephant in the room, and the elephant in the room are the big seven, the tech stocks, the circular investing scam that they have engaged in over the past 5 years. Anything good that we've seen in our economy has been as a result of the inflation of these tech stocks, 7 of them. Many now know, and you stated last week, this is absolutely a bubble. It's a massive bubble. And you have been one of the few analysts that is really calling clearly like what we're seeing here. You predicted last week that bubble is going to burst at some point. So when we come back, and we won't ask you when, right? Because I understand there's a lot of games that they can play with that. But when we come back, I would like to talk about these 7 stocks driving the majority of the growth of the 401ks and the investments of the middle to upper class, or the upper class. Those chickens could be coming home to roost. What does that mean? And even though we can't predict when this is going to happen, or necessarily the velocity of this crash, what does it look like for regular people? That's what I would like to talk to you about, because I do think that there are some defensive moves that people can make, regular people can make. Fortunes were made during the Depression. Fortunes are made, in all types of economic situations. So I'd like to talk to you about when it happens, what people can do to protect themselves. So we're going to be talking with Jack in a moment. We're going to take a quick break and come right back. Keep it tuned right here, because we're going to get to the solutions part of this. We might not be able to do a ton, but there are decisions we can make as families and as small businesses that can protect us as best possible as we face these really strange economic times. We'll be back in a moment with the Jack Gamble. I am embarking on a parasite cleanse with Purge. It is the Purge Advanced Parasite Cleanse. As I mentioned, I'm on day 4 and it's going very well. It's a gentle cleanse. I might ramp it up to the ivermectin. There's an ivermectin cleanse that the wellness company has that is, I think, a little bit too intense for me. I want to start with something a little gentler. But what people don't realize is that one of the biggest threats to our health isn't something that we see. It's something that is living inside us, something very, very, very tiny, microscopic, and that is parasites. They enter through your food, water, even the air we breathe. And once they're in, they drain your energy, cloud your mind, and can weaken your immune system, quietly stealing your vitality day after day. So this is why I am now doing my very first ever. I'll let you guys know how it goes. I'm enjoying it. I think it's working. It's the Purge Advanced Parasite Cleanse. It isn't just another supplement. It is a natural, powerful formula. It's made with ingredients used for centuries to detoxify the body, eliminate parasites, and restore balance safely and effectively. We're so thrilled to welcome Purge Parasite Cleanse as one of our advertisers here in the Shannon Joy Show. So we'll be talking about the ingredients. We'll be talking more about how it works, but you guys can try it with me if you go to www.purgestore.com/joy. That is purgestore.com/joy. Make sure you use the promo code JOY for 15% off if you want to start on the parasite cleanse. So Lupine, thank you for setting me up for that. And yes, I will make sure that's why you're so loopy, Brandon Bennett. You're loopy because you might have parasites and you can cleanse them with Purge. So make sure you go to purgestore.com/joy. That is purgestore.com/joy.
This is Jennifer with darkbags.com. I wanted to show you one of our newest products from Escape Zone. This is our satellite Faraday sleeve. So it actually will fit your satellite phone, which we've noticed that there wasn't any product on the market that perfectly fit them, so we decided to make them ourselves. And it has this Velcro closure right here to close it up, and that makes this dust and water resistant. So what's nice about this Faraday pouch is that it'll protect against any EMPs. So your emergency device actually will always be protected in here as long as it stays in here. You can take it out for everyday use, but if you're not using it, we recommend that you store it in here. Again, this is available on darkbags.com.
Darkbags.com/joy, or you can go to sat123.com/joy as well. Make sure you always use your JOY promo code at the satellite phone store for an additional 10% off your purchase. We have lots of great gifting opportunities coming up. We're going to have Brett Miller in just a couple weeks, and we're going to talk about all of the ways that you can bless your loved ones, the gift of preparedness. So we're going to have a lot of specials at sat123.com. So stay tuned for that. Let's bring in Jack Gamble. You can follow him on YouTube. Handle there, at Nobody Special Finance. And he uploads his videos every day and also has them uploaded on Twitter as well. Fantastic. Market updates every morning, which is just, so much great information, Jack. Really appreciate you and your ability to explain all of this fraud. And a lot of it basically is. It's like the government, it's one giant Ponzi scheme. Democrats and Republicans in bed with the banksters and the finance people, and they're all just cheating. They're just cheating. And there's no better example of this than what you explained so brilliantly in round tripping, what is happening with these massive tech stocks, 7 of them, all driving the majority of the gains in the markets over the past 5 years, creating a massive tech bubble that everybody now can see. We also had last week, you covered this, and I don't think anyone else did. I think you actually pushed this out. The CFO of OpenAI floating the idea of bailouts. Essentially, they know that the fat lady is about to sing. There's no there. Nobody wants the tech. The tech doesn't work. It's not any good. It's all just bad. It's one big illusion. And they're not making any money, which you've explained. Through a process called round tripping, which you are going to explain to us. But this is now really exposing the tech bubble. What do you think is going to happen there? You predicted that it's going to pop. What does that look like? Why is it going to pop? And please explain, the fraud and how they're just so blatantly cheating. This is why they're going to need the bailouts coming up. But go ahead and explain what's going on with that, if you could.
It was Thursday last week. Somebody asked me a question in my morning show. What do I think is next for the AI bubble? And I said, I think the government is going to get involved and try to keep the bubble inflated. Either the government would take a stake in some kind of data center or some way to use tax dollars to keep the bubble inflated. And it was like 3 hours later that Sarah Friar, the OpenAI CFO, went on the Wall Street Journal's Tech Live event and said that they wanted the government to backstop their debt, which basically a bailout in advance is what a loan guarantee or a backstop of debt is, right? They're going to negotiate that if we ever default on our debt, the government will pick up the tab. So the taxpayers get none of the benefits. We get all the higher electric bills. AI supposedly takes all of our jobs, but it's okay if it doesn't work. We get to pay the price for that failure. Sounds like a great deal for them. So that raises a question. Hey, how is OpenAI, the company at the epicenter of the AI bubble? It's the greatest thing since freaking New Coke. How is this company asking for a bailout? I thought they were all making so much money. None of them make money. And I've been screaming this for 2 years. Only NVIDIA makes any money. Only the people making the hardware. Everything else has been this giant round tripping scheme. And round tripping is not new. That's the important thing. This is an old accounting gimmick. It's illegal to a certain extent. It's not illegal outright, but if it becomes the lion's share of your business and it gets so big that it rises to the level of criminal, then it's illegal. And it's no different than you give money to your customers so your customers can give the money to you. It's your money making a round trip. And NVIDIA invested in 49 of their own customers in 2024 alone. They gave money. They call them strategic investments or NVIDIA's partners. They buy a stake of the, chunk of the stock, whatever, of the company they're selling product to. And now all of a sudden that company can afford to buy more of their product because we just bought a chunk of their company. NVIDIA has done this with 49 of their customers. Microsoft has done this with OpenAI. Microsoft bought $13 billion worth of stock in OpenAI. It's still a privately held company, but Microsoft owns about 32% of them. And they supposedly paid $13 billion for this big investment in OpenAI, but nobody really knows how much actual dollars Microsoft gave them. They think it's about $1 billion. Most of the money that Microsoft gave OpenAI was in the form of data center credits, which are like coupons for free data center rental. It's the AI bubble's magic funny money. So,
oh my word.
Microsoft buys a chunk of OpenAI. OpenAI rents Microsoft's data centers. So OpenAI redeems those coupons with Microsoft. And then when those coupons are redeemed, Microsoft reports it as revenue. It's not even a real dollar making a round trip now. It's just a slip of paper that says, I owe you an hour of GPU rental. And
oh my word.
Microsoft has done this with OpenAI. Amazon and Google did this with Anthropic. They've done this with CoreWeave and NVIDIA. Everywhere you look in this AI bubble, it is the hardware manufacturers are financing cash incinerating AI companies. None of them make any profit. And it's so important to know. All you ever hear about is how our revenue has grown so much. The top line, 30, 40% year over year growth. But at the very base of this foundation is a business that loses money. Every single prompt that has ever been entered into a chatbot, whether it's Google, Meta, OpenAI, Microsoft, any of these things, they have all lost money on every single one, whether you're using the free version or the paid version. It all loses money. And that money has come from investors. As long as the investors are willing to give them more money to buy a chunk of these companies, they can keep this up. But now the numbers have gotten so big. In order to keep growing the revenue, they need more money. They need more investors' capital. And the investors are saying, where are your profits? You don't have any. You look like
now,
you were about to ask.
Yeah, this is like the opposite of what we're being told about AI. Like Elon Musk is telling us that the robots are going to run everything. The AI is so smart that it's basically God, that none of us are ever going to work again. We're just going to have a leisure lifestyle while the robots fly around and artificial intelligence makes, I guess, everything happen. and everyone is buying into this. Like, why isn't the tech working? Why can't these AI companies, and why isn't artificial intelligence, I mean, which has been hyped to an extent that everyone just assumes that it's going to be the future. What is it that is so fundamentally flawed about these AI business models in your estimation?
It's just not that smart yet. Look, this whole bubble has been an experiment. In 2017, a couple of engineers at Google DeepMind wrote a white paper that was called "Attention is All You Need," and it was based on the Beatles song. And the "Attention is All You Need" white paper discovered what they called the Transformers, named after the 80s cartoon. Engineers are dweebs. Whatever. They figured out a mathematical formula for determining the importance of a word in a string of text and then anticipating what the next word should be. And when they plugged this into their software, they found out, hey, this is almost like talking to a person. Almost. It was a major breakthrough. And then in 2022, Silicon Valley and Wall Street got together and they looked at the stock market in 2022. It was in free fall. And they said, we need a shiny new thing. Let's make it AI. And they launched this experiment to take the attention white paper from those Google engineers, give it all of the information they could steal. And they stole pretty much the whole internet. And then give it all the computing hardware money could buy. And then they launched the biggest accounting fraud in history to finance the construction of that compute. And now here we are several years later, and they have not gotten smarter. ChatGPT 5 was not better than ChatGPT 4, even though Sam Altman and Jensen Huang sit by the fire where the money is burning and tell us stories about how this AI is going to change everything. Ask it to count the R's in strawberry. It can't. Look at what lawyers are doing to their careers. They're hallucinating case law, fake jurisprudence, and then filing briefs with this chatbot hallucinated garbage in it. And then they're getting like held in contempt of court by the judges because they're putting fake information in official court filings. This is happening over and over again. And MIT did a study a few months ago, and they published the results. 95% of companies that have done some kind of an AI pilot have shown no return on investment. 95 out of 100. Now, what they didn't say is most of them are losing money. They were polite. They said they're not making a return. 95%. Now, there was another study by a group called Better Up that found they coined the term work slop. Is what we all know what Facebook slop is, like these videos of sharks singing in the shower, stupid things like that.
Right.
So what Better Up did is they took, like, say, the 95% of companies that are not making money with AI, and they started surveying. I think it was 1,100 people from all different white collar backgrounds.
Okay.
And they said, how much have you seen work slop? And work slop was defined as low effort AI generated garbage that on the surface looks like real work, but it's actually worthless or negative value add crap.
Wow.
And they found that 40% of employees surveyed had been given work slop at some point in the last month, that it took an average of 2 hours to clean up this work slop every time. There's the numbers. $186 per instance of work slop and lost productivity. That's based on the self-reported salaries of these people. And so they extrapolated that last number there on the right, that $9 million number, that's for a company with 10,000 employees, how much money every year they're losing because of AI in the workplace. This bubble has been sold to us as a breakthrough in human ingenuity and productivity. $9 million in lost productivity from a company with 10,000 employees. So, you can listen to Sam's BS about how it's going to cure cancer and free education for all the children of the world. Well, then, Sam, if you can do that, how come you just made it do porn? Why is that your new thing? Like OpenAI and their Sora is going to do erotica now. That's his big plan, because OpenAI is desperate for cash and they're going bankrupt. And that has been the underlying theme in this bubble, is it doesn't make money because it's just not that good. And now that it doesn't make money and it's just not that good, people are realizing that they're starting to pull the curtain back on this fraud. And the fraud is going to be biblical when that gets exposed, because people don't realize, whether they know it or not, they have bought this crap. They own the stock and they own the debt in their 401ks. And it's too late. I've been trying to warn people for 2 years. The financial press said, don't listen to this guy. He's just a Twitter rando. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And so here we are. It's too late. Now, we found out about it last week when Microsoft reported their earnings. And buried within the headlines, Microsoft took a $4.1 billion charge on their investment in OpenAI. And the way that works, Microsoft uses equity accounting methodology. Basically, they take the losses that OpenAI made times Microsoft's percentage of ownership of OpenAI, and that's how much money Microsoft lost because of OpenAI's losses. Now, here's the problem with that. If you backfit that based on Microsoft owning 32% of OpenAI, that means that in the third quarter alone, OpenAI lost $12.6 billion.
My word.
It's important to understand that because in 2024, OpenAI lost $5 billion in the whole year off of just $3.7 billion in revenue. Last year, OpenAI wasn't profitable and they weren't even close. This year, in just this recent quarter, they lost 2.5 times that amount in just 3 months. Not only is this company not making money, and not only are they not getting better, they're getting worse. And a few days after that story breaks, Sarah Fryer goes to this Wall Street Journal Tech Live event and says, we're looking for the government to backstop our debt because it's the only way we can keep this bubble inflated. Nobody's going to loan us money because the world just saw in Microsoft's earnings how all we really do is burn money. And so without the taxpayers' implicit guarantee, they can't borrow anymore. And if they can't borrow anymore, then they can't meet any of the ridiculous spending promises they've made. They can't keep buying NVIDIA's GPUs, and they can't keep the stock bubble inflated. And then, of course, everybody went into panic after that CFO said that. Oh, my God, OpenAI asked for a bailout. And they did. A loan guarantee is a bailout negotiated in advance. And there's no way to not beg, right? If you're asking the government to bail you out, you're begging. By default. That's right. Like just asking in the first place is an act of begging. So the next day, Sarah Fryer says, oh, no, I misspoke. She didn't misspeak. She gave a whole elaborate diatribe about how a loan guarantee will make financing cheaper and they'll be able to borrow more money, a higher loan to value ratio. Sam Altman released this long-winded essay on Twitter, all talking about how he wasn't asking for a bailout. And in that long essay where he says he's not asking for a bailout, he asked for a bailout. But that's not the only way. It's not just the loan guarantees. We find out that OpenAI has also asked the government to include data center construction with CHIPS Act funding. Now, the CHIPS Act was all about building chip manufacturing capability here in the United States. The CHIPS Act was not about subsidizing the purchase of chips made in Taiwan. It was about bringing back American chip manufacturing. So he wants the government to directly subsidize his chips. And then we found out on Friday that FHFA Director Bill Pulte is saying that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are exploring taking equity stakes in tech companies. Well, that's another way that they could be bailing out OpenAI is by having these government-sponsored enterprises, Fannie and Freddie, give money to these tech companies. Anything they can do to keep this bubble inflated. And look, President Trump has had his photo ops for Project Stargate with Sam Altman, and he has Jensen Huang at the White House all the time. He has attached himself politically to this bubble. I don't think it's so crazy to imagine they'll use taxpayer dollars to try to keep it inflated.
That is outrageous. And it's a trend of this government getting into bed with and taking stakes in. I mean, there are, again, they will try to completely, reinvent what a bailout means. And you identify loan guarantees, direct subsidies, getting the government involved through Fannie Mae and Freddie, the government taking a stake in certain companies. We've seen that with a couple tech companies saying that it's a national security issue, right? So that the government has to get involved in some of these things. And so if that's the case, though, then they could extend this bubble even further. I mean, how long can they extend this bubble? Because last week, there were some short sellers sniffing around, right? There was a lot of chatter because typically
one big one,
Jack, a big one. I'll let you explain it. Okay. Typically when this happens, when they see the overvaluation, they know exactly what's going on there. This is when they can make $1 billion, maybe more. And so that didn't happen, which is surprising. right? Typically, this is when they're going to go in and they're going to make their money. So I know one likes short sellers, but they're fraud sniffers. That's what they are. What do you make of that last week? I mean, there was a lot of chatter that was going to happen. Somehow they averted it. But will they be able to avert that or delay that any further, do you think?
I think they'll try. I don't know whether they're able to or not. I don't know. That's a good question. Just the fact that they're asking the government for the money, though, shows that this is obviously not the big breakthrough we thought it was. If it was so good, they wouldn't need government money.
Right.
Now, I should also throw the disclaimer. I'm not short any of these names personally. I don't have any position one way or another in these companies. I guess I should just disclose that. But one person who is short in a big way is a guy by the name of Michael Burry, who you may remember was played by Christian Bale in the movie The Big Short. He came out of his Twitter burrow to see if he would see his shadow, as he does every now and then. He gets active on social media again, and he announced that he was short Palantir and he was short NVIDIA. And actually, just before we went live, Burry was on Twitter, and he gave a big speech, not big speech, but he ran a lengthy post on Twitter about depreciation of GPUs, which is something else I've been talking about on my channel for 2 years. You know, big tech is lying about how long all this hardware is going to last. They're using a straight line 6-year depreciation schedule. Basically, every year we'll deduct 1/6 of the value of this hardware from our earnings. But these are chips that are going to last for 3 years, maybe 4, which means they're inflating their earnings, which we just established they don't have any earnings. So their earnings are actually even worse. You know, lying about depreciation is another way they're committing accounting fraud, in my opinion. And Burry came out today and he was talking about this, mentioning the 2 to 3 year product cycles. And yet they're claiming these GPUs will last for 6. It's no way they're going to last for 6 years. So, you know, one of the most famous short sellers in history, a guy who he doesn't have a perfect record. Burry's gotten some calls wrong before. We all have. But this is a big one. This is the big one. And he's out here saying, well, pretty much what Jack's been saying for 2 years. So I'm just going to bask in that for a minute, if you don't mind me gloating.
You were right. I mean, it's so difficult to find truth tellers in the country today because everything is so political, especially in the area of economics and finance. Like, it's so political because they're cheating, right? And so they're getting a full story or a clearer picture. The American people are getting a muddled, false, untrue picture on a regular basis. And it makes it very hard for us to do smart things as individuals to protect ourselves and our families and our homes and our futures. And that's where I want to go. You know, so this could pop at any time. I think you're right. I think we're going to see Trump announce a stake. But see, what I'm loving about this, Jack, is that the consumers, like, I'm always looking at the market. Like, are we buying this? And the market picked up really fast last week. Like, you know, she trotted out this little statement, you know, the CFO from OpenAI about the bailout. And it was like immediate. And that was without Fox News and Fox Business and all the big, like, you know, finance news sites screaming about it. It was voices like yours. And it was just kind of this natural awareness that was building from independent analysts saying, okay, what's going on here? And that gives me a lot of hope that people are waking up to this more quickly. Also, the pushback that we're seeing from local communities against data centers. Like, no one freaking wants a data center in their backyard. Like, no one. And we've seen a couple go down in flames, like, just sitting there, cannot get local zoning boards to pass it or even get power generated. So there was another story that I was talking to you about. I don't have it in front of me, but there was a new survey that more and more Americans want dumb homes. They want dumb cars. They want dumb homes. They don't want the surveillance. They don't want the tech. They don't want the robots. They think they're creepy. They don't like where this is going. Like Elon Musk saying that he's going to put a chip in our brain and control us with the interface from whatever. Like, it's not cool anymore. It's not fun anymore. And normal people who live on this planet and like humanity are getting a little freaked out by this. So even the marketing is falling apart for these people, where you're like, yeah, I like AI a little bit, but I don't want to be on screens for the rest of my life. You know, I think that that's kind of a good sign that people are waking up, but that doesn't mean there isn't going to be pain. What do you make of the general market and the response to to all of this? What are you saying?
I do think that there is a pushback. This is the first I've heard of it, this article that you just put up, but I'm so relieved to see it because I do think we are needlessly complicating stupidly simple things. And this is one of the ways that CPI is a lie about inflation. If we get a stove and it gets more expensive, but we add some kind of new program feature to the stove, then the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that as a hedonic adjustment. They say the stove is improved and therefore it's not a cost increase because you're getting a better stove. Well, I can't get the old stove, the dumb one. You don't sell it anymore, so I don't have a choice. The base model stove just got more expensive, but they hedonically adjust a lot of cost increase away by saying it's an improvement. So a trend like this is actually a really good way to combat inflation. Let's see also in vehicles. Good God, they've complicated vehicles to such a ridiculous extent that you can't even fix one without a computer anymore.
I hate my car.
I'm happy to see that.
My car yells at me all day. All day long, my car yells at me. And I know it's gathering information on me and surveilling me. And I'm like, I want to unplug all the electronics. Drive me crazy. I just want a dumb car that is mechanical, that doesn't have all the bells and whistles. I don't want to go back to the hand crank on the window. I'll use that. But it's like, it's just crazy. And I think that there is a market for that. I hope that there's a market for that, but that will necessitate, or we will need to have regulation. They'll have to go back and look at environmental regulation and EPA guidelines, because one of the reasons that we have all these really crappy appliances is that they have to be lighter, and so they don't meet standards for sustainability. So we're gonna have to change that so people can make real things. But I would love to see that. How can people protect themselves? I know that you don't want to make a prediction as to when this is going to happen. And man, my whole life, I feel like we've been waiting for it to happen, the big one, when it does, I mean, I love seeing people getting into dumb tech. I love seeing people get into land, Scarlett O'Hara and Tara. I love seeing people in metals, gold and silver. I think the more Americans who are diversifying and getting into real things, the better, because it just makes the foundational economy a little bit stronger, maybe strong enough to sustain even a major market situation, a market collapse. I don't know if that's the case, but what's a scenario that you could see where we can beat this, we can win, the market can do things to mitigate what the government and their cronies are doing to us, and we get out? I mean, I know there's going to be pain. There's no way to get out of this without pain. I think you'd probably share that. But what would be a way that we could get out of it, maybe with liberty intact, and then a situation where we can rebuild? Your thoughts?
So again, you got to do this disclaimer thing. I don't have the permission slip from the government to give out financial advice anywhere. So all I can tell you is what I do with my personal finances.
That's right.
I have largely been out of stocks since 2022. So by the way, take that as a grain of salt with everything I tell you, because I've been out of stocks while the most monstrous stock rally in history has taken place. So I don't get them all right. I have been in Bitcoin, gold, and silver predominantly, and cash for the last few years. And those have done pretty well. Bitcoin in particular did really well. Now in September and October, I drastically reduced my Bitcoin exposure. I think we're heading into crypto winter here, which means 2 years of significantly lower Bitcoin prices before that cycle repeats. So I still own a little bit of Bitcoin, but I'm pretty much out of most of it, which means right now I'm sitting on a lot of gold, silver, and cash. Sitting in cash, because I think most assets you would want to buy, you'll probably get a look at cheaper at some point in the near future. But understand, even just sitting in cash is a risk because inflation is eating you up. So, you can mitigate inflation by buying treasury bills or something like that to earn, just under 4% interest while you're waiting, just barely keeping up with inflation. You're not really getting anywhere, but you're not being eaten alive at least.
Right.
And I also think gold and silver, I think regardless of what's coming, I think precious metals has to be a major component of your planning here. Look, what's probably going to happen is the same thing that's happened during the last few crises. We'll get a big deflationary event where the price of everything is going to fall very abruptly. Stocks, will fall, Bitcoin will fall, gold and silver will fall with it, because when the margin call stops, when the people you borrowed money from to make an investment call you and say, put more money in your account or we're going to close you out, you sell anything you can, not what you want to, and that will include people's gold and silver. So I think you'll see gold and silver get swept up in that sell-off as well. So there will be a short time where you'll get a look at a lower price, and then they'll do what they always do. They'll turn on the money printers and they'll lower interest rates to try to offset it, and they'll bring back inflation. And so, when that hits, you better own some gold and silver when that hits.
Right.
As far as stocks, I just think stocks are divorced from reality right now. It is a casino that the values are just arbitrarily determined by people that are not trustworthy. I'm not playing until I see that change.
Okay, until you see those fundamental changes. All right, very good. How can people think? I've learned so much from you today. Thank you so much. Anything else that you think the audience should know before I let you go that you think is important to keep an eye on? And most importantly, how can they find you, follow you, support you, and become a melon head like me? Because that's what I am. I'm a big old melon head and really enjoying your show. But yeah, how can people find you and learn from you?
Best place to find me is on YouTube. Nobody Special Finance on YouTube. Like you mentioned, I'm JG_Nuke on Twitter. Everything I produce also goes on Twitter. And I'm also on Spotify. Nobody Special Finance on Spotify. As far as one last thing I'd warn about, it's private credit is one thing I'd warn people about. President Trump signed an executive order a few months ago allowing alternative assets into people's retirement accounts, IRAs, 401ks, to a lesser extent pensions. And there is a big bag of hot garbage that Wall Street needs to sell to anybody. And they've been having trouble finding buyers. And right now that buyer is you. It's being sold to your 401ks and your IRAs. And there was a story today in Bloomberg about a company called Renovo that just went bankrupt. 2 weeks ago, BlackRock reported the $150 million of private debt that they lent to this Renovo company. They reported it at par, which basically means it's worth what we lent it to them. And today it is worth nothing because the company just filed for bankruptcy. So BlackRock lied about what this debt was worth. They knew the company was on the ropes. Now it's worthless. And this is the kind of stuff they're trying to park in people's 401ks and IRAs. And I honestly couldn't tell you how to prevent it from going there, because what they're doing is they are using the people you trust, your financial advisors, your wealth managers. They're using things like DoorDash vouchers to get them in the door to these seminars where they talk about the exciting opportunities to democratize access to alternative investments. They talk about how the yield is so great and how it's outperformed the market. It is a lie. It is not worth what they say it's worth. They're going to sell all this crap to people's retirement accounts. Then they'll market to market and people will watch their retirements go up in smoke. So right now we are bailing out Wall Street, and what's probably going to happen when the bill comes due, Washington, D.C. will bail out us by printing money and causing inflation again.
Is there any way people can protect their IRA or 401k? I mean, so what should they look out for? I mean, could this be happening as just a matter of course through their financial advisors? They don't even know that they're in their 401k is being bought in. And what should they say to their financial advisors? Like, I don't want this, or where should they be? Like, where should they put their?
Yes. The asterisk, I don't have the permission slip from the government. But the financial advisors may not even know it's happening, because the funds that the financial advisors are putting people into could be buying these things, right? It's the BlackRock Target Date 2035 retirement fund. And the financial advisor says the yield has been great over the last 10 years. It plays good and it's safe. It's a mix of stocks and bonds. It's a diversified asset. And what you don't realize is that BlackRock, who manages that fund, has been slowly putting these private equity and private credit investments in it. So the only real thing you can do is you can tell your financial advisor you don't want anything to do with private credit or private equity assets. Even then, he may not even know, because these funds and these things are very opaque. It's hard to see what's in them. There are reporting requirements. They're required to put out these prospectuses, but as soon as they put out a prospectus, the next day they could go change what's in the fund. So you're really only getting a snapshot back in time.
Got it.
It's not easy, to be honest with you. It's really not easy to know if this is being done. But At least I can raise the alarm. I may not know how to put the fire out, but at least I could set the alarm off and let people know it's starting, you know?
Yeah, no, certainly. I will follow up on this story as well, and we will source it, and we'll get some explainers on that for people as well. There's got to be something people can do to protect what they have. So really appreciate you, Jack. Thank you so much for being with us. And you have a great day.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Shannon. Bye, everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah. Follow Jack, guys. He's awesome at JG_nuke. At JG_nuke on the Twitter. Also, you can follow him at Nobody Special Finance on YouTube as well. Again, his explainers, his understanding of what's happening in the market, so unique, so independent, outside of the two-party political system. And that's where you're really actually going to go to get some real truth about what is going on. There are ways to protect yourself. So I want to thank all of you for being with us today on the Shannon Joy Show. We will be back tomorrow. Dane Wigington, he is the world's foremost expert, I would say, on solar radiation management, geoengineering, cloud seeding, you name it. We're going to have a weather report with Dane tomorrow on the Shannon Joy Show. As we move into the winter months, what are they doing up in the skies? We're going to get a detailed report from Dane and really talk about how more and more people are beginning to understand and see what is happening with the manipulation of our weather. It's going to impact every American. So you guys need to understand what is doing and what is going on and how to push back against a lot of these things from your own community. You guys are great. Have a wonderful day. We'll be back tomorrow to do it all again right here on the Shannon Joy Show.